By late 1943, the Atlantic was supposed to be a graveyard for German U-boats, not a battlefield, an execution ground. For years, the Kriegsmarine's hunters had stalked the sea lanes like wolves, dragging Allied shipping down into the black. But by 43, the wolves were bleeding out. The Allies had built a machine, a technological cage that closed tighter with every month. Radar, sonar, HFDF, escort carriers, liberators with 22 million candle-power Lee lights, hunter-killer groups who didn't defend convoys anymore, but hunted submarines like sport. A U-boat captain who raised his periscope a second too long could expect a depth charge pattern before he had time to curse. The life expectancy of a German submariner was so short, the British joked you could measure it in patrols per coffin. And yet, as Allied commanders patted themselves on the back, believing they had solved submarine warfare, deep in the collapsing chaos of the Third Reich, a ghost was rising. A weapon so advanced that if it had appeared 6 months earlier, the ocean war might have started all over again. The Allies weren't ready to fight it. They didn't even know it existed. This is the story of the Type 21 Electro Coat, the submarine that appeared just in time to be too late. To understand why it terrified Allied analysts, you have to understand just how broken the U-boat arm was by mid-1943, the happy time when German submarines slaughtered convoys with impunity was ancient history. The invention of centimetric radar changed everything. For the first time, aircraft could spot a surfaced U-boat in total darkness. They didn't even need moonlight. Liberators could sweep the mid-Atlantic, the former air gap, and catch U-boats refueling, recharging, or simply trying to breathe. When that ghostly blue lead light snapped on at night, illuminating a U-boat's conning tower like a stage spotlight, crews sometimes froze from sheer terror. They knew what came next. Hedgehogs, depth charges, screaming engines overhead. Some men didn't even reach the hatch before the first explosions ripped the hull open. The Type 7, once the pride of the Kriegsmarine, was reduced to prey. The math was merciless. A U-boat underwater could make maybe 7 knots for an hour before its batteries collapsed. A corvette could do 16 knots indefinitely. If the U-boat ran, it was caught. If it surfaced, it died. Submarines that once traveled on the surface 90% of the time were now terrified to rise at all. Dönitz begged the Nazi high command for a miracle, a weapon to flip the board, something that would make U-boats hunters again instead of victims. And in a twisted way, he got it. Its prophet was Helmut Walter, an engineer with a brilliant mind and a dangerous idea. Walter proposed a submarine engine that didn't need outside air, a turbine powered by hydrogen peroxide, perhydrol, that decomposed into superheated steam at almost 1,000 degrees Celsius. Theoretically, his submarine could remain submerged indefinitely and sprint underwater at speeds unheard of in the 1940s, 25 knots or more. Even Allied destroyers couldn't make those speeds underwater. The early prototypes proved it worked. One test boat, the V8 achieved 28 knots submerged, so fast it set records that wouldn't be broken for a decade. But the Walter engine had a problem. It wanted to explode. Perhydrol was dangerously unstable, corrosive, toxic, and impossible to mass-produce under Allied bombing. And the boats equipped with it had almost no range. The dream was brilliant, but impractical. Germany needed something now, something fast, something deadly, something that could be built before the Kriegsmarine collapsed entirely. And so a committee created a hybrid. They took the sleek, teardrop Walter hull and ripped out the unstable peroxide engines. In their place, they packed a mountain of batteries, 3 times as many as any U-boat before it. They streamlined the hull, removed the deck gun, shaved away every inch of drag. They added a snorkel so the sub could run its diesels while submerged. They upgraded the hydrophones so sensitive that an operator could hear a convoy 20 kilometers away. They automated the torpedo reload system so efficiently a single Walter 1 could fire 18 torpedoes in 20 minutes, an entire wolf pack's worth of firepower from one boat. And when all of this was bolted together, something monstrous emerged. A submarine designed not for the surface, but for the deep. A submarine that spent 95% of its time underwater. A submarine that could dive, sprint, attack, reload, and vanish without ever breaking the waves. The Type 21. When Allied intelligence officers first examined its blueprints after the war, many believed they were looking at Cold War technology, something from the 1950s accidentally mislabeled 1944. The X-31 had a clean teardrop hull, decades ahead of its time. It cruised underwater faster than it cruised on the surface, a first in naval history. It could stay submerged for days, not hours. Its snorkel let it cross the North Sea without surfacing once, making radar almost useless. To an Allied destroyer, a X-31 wasn't just hard to find. It was impossible. Even sonar struggled. The hull shape reflected almost none of the active ping, and its silent running mode, slow, smooth, battery-powered, was so quiet, sonar operators mistook it for biological noise. Its offensive power was equally horrifying. It could fire 6 torpedoes and reload all tubes in minutes. It could attack without ever raising a periscope, using its hydrophone array and onboard computer. It could position itself underwater at 17 knots, get ahead of a convoy, wait in silence, and then unleash a volley that no escort could outrun. The Walter 1 was the submarine every navy in the world would eventually try to build. But first, Germany had to manufacture it, while being bombed night and day. Albert Speer devised a radical solution. Build the submarine like a Lego set, break it into 8 modules, and construct them in inland factories that had never built submarines before. Locomotive works, bridge companies, steel mills. Then float each module down Germany's canal system to Hamburg, Bremen, or Danzig to be welded together. On paper, Germany could build 33 per month. In reality, it was chaos. Sections arrived warped, misaligned, poorly welded. Bombers hit the canals. Forced laborers sabotaged wiring. Modules arrived with pipes that didn't fit and bulkheads off by inches. The shipyards became Frankenstein workshops, trying to stitch together mismatched parts built by factories hundreds of miles apart. Yet somehow, through brutality, speed, and desperation, 118 Type 21s were launched by war's end. But a launched submarine is not a combat submarine. It must be tested, repaired, trained, mastered. Most X-21s died at the pier, while air raids screamed overhead. Most crews barely understood the advanced systems. Batteries caught fire, hydraulics leaked, electric motors failed without warning. The Kriegsmarine needed months. They had weeks. Only 2 Type 21s ever made it to sea on operational patrols. One of them, the most famous, was U-2511 under Korvettenkapitän Adalbert Schnee, a U-boat ace with more experience than almost any man left in the force. In April 1945, with Germany collapsing and Berlin already half in ruins, Schnee took U-2511 to sea for the first and last time. He wanted to see if the legends were true. He submerged immediately and didn't surface again. For days, he ran underwater, using the snorkel only briefly, slipping past British patrols as though he were made of smoke. Sonar pings washed over his hull without reflection. Destroyers passed overhead without a clue he was there. His boat handled like a shark, silent, fast, and hungry. On May the 4th, his sonar operator picked up a group of British warships. Schnee stalked them for hours, plotting their movement without a single visual sighting. Finally, he sprinted underwater at 17 knots, something no submarine had ever done, and slipped through the escort screen. When Schnee raised his periscope, the British heavy cruiser HMS Norfolk was just 500 meters away. Perfect firing angle, perfect distance, perfect solution. He could have sunk her with one salvo. The escorting destroyers would have had no idea where the attack came from. The X-1 was invisible. It was invincible. It was everything the U-boat arm dreamed of. And Schnee lowered the periscope. Dönitz had sent out the ceasefire order hours earlier. The war was over. Schnee dove deep, slid under the British formation like a ghost, and disappeared. He never fired a shot, but he didn't need to. He had proven it. The X-1 worked. It worked flawlessly. And had it appeared 6 months earlier, before Normandy, before the Allies truly choked German industry, before the U-boat force collapsed, the Atlantic War could have reignited with terrifying force. Imagine wolf packs of X-1s sprinting underwater at 17 knots, launching 18 torpedoes per attack, diving to safety before the escorts even reacted. Imagine convoys torn apart, not by swarms of U-boats, but by a handful of underwater predators no sonar could find. Imagine every doctrine the Allies spent 4 years perfecting, becoming worthless overnight. That was the nightmare the X-1 represented. A revolution delivered too late to matter. When the Allies captured the shipyards in 1945, they were stunned. The X-1s on the slipways were 20 years ahead of anything the Allies had. The Americans salvaged U-2513 and tested it exhaustively. Harry Truman even rode aboard during a demonstration dive. The British took several, the Soviets took the rest. And within a decade, every major navy in the world built submarines using the Type 81's principles: streamlined hulls, massive batteries, snorkels, quiet engines. The Soviet Whiskey class was nearly a direct copy. The American Tang class, the British Porpoise class, all had Seat-1 DNA baked into them. In a bitter irony, the submarine that never fired a shot in combat became the father of every modern submarine on Earth. The Type 21 didn't save Hitler's navy. It didn't win battles. It barely made it to sea. But it changed history. It showed the world what a submarine could be. Not a boat that hid underwater, but a predator that lived there. The Allies had mastered the old kind of submarine. The X-1 belonged to a new era. And if it had arrived just a little earlier, the Atlantic might have swallowed many more men before the war finally ended.